to a new venue. Good afternoon. Welcome, students, faculty, and guests, to our second forum lecture of the spring semester, Black Women's Geographies by Dr. LaShay Harvey. Students, you may not know how much work your faculty put into preparing their assignments. It's considerable and always done with equal parts of love and rigor. So when preparing to teach Kindred as a faculty group, we really wanted to get these things right. How do we address the history of enslavement in America? How do we understand how Octavia Butler presents it to us? And how can we draw you as artists and designers with unique backgrounds of your own into that conversation? The suggestion was made that in order to even begin, it was of great importance to present and contextualize the lived experience of Black American women. We have a portrait of Dana and Kindred. Before we begin to address her story, is there more we can know? We are pleased to welcome Dr. LaShay Harvey to come speak with us today on this topic. Thank you, LaShay. Working with the rubric of space, place, and time, and the warm theme of transformation, she will help us locate Dana's story. I would like to extend special thanks to Professor Ernest Shaw for insisting that we have Dr. Harvey. He's been invaluable in our faculty conversations on Kindred, so welcome.
First, like to, is this good? Thank Micah for engaging the students in work like Kindred. Again, I understand that it was done quite some time ago in a different way. So I appreciate having the opportunity to revisit Octavia Butler's work, because Octavia Butler is very important writer, and she's made very important contributions to not just literature, but I think to culture here in the United States and abroad. So also, Dr. Harvey and I first met at a barbershop on St. Paul Street. It's called Reflections Eternal. And there's some outstanding brothers and sisters that frequent that barbershop. And I could tell the second we met that we were kind of maybe, there was some kindredness somewhere in there. So yeah, it's an honor really to be here to introduce her. Dr. LaShay Harvey is a professor, seamstress, collage artist, and interim associate dean of student learning and research in graduate studies here at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Dr. Harvey has always been attracted to creation stories, those stories that tell how something became. LaShay's work and career interrogates not only how something comes to be, that is to say, born or birthed, but also examines the narratives that surround birth and becoming. To this end, Dr. Harvey holds a PhD in human sexuality studies and a master's degree in education. She has taught and trained on sexuality education for 20 years, has been inside the college classroom for almost 10 years, where she has received teaching awards and fellowships. Her most recent course, taught at the Maryland Institute College of Art, Narratives, Black Women, and Art, was her piece de resistance. Dr. Harvey was born in Southeast Georgia and raised in Northeast Florida. And this space and positionality informs everything she does and nothing, all at the same time. Without further ado, please put your hands together for Dr. LaShay Harvey.
Well, great day and welcome. I and all of my ancestors greet you and all of your ancestors in this day, time, and place. So, shall we get into this thing that you all are here to pack, unpack, question, and unquestion? As Ernest said, it was clear to me that you could not discuss a work such as Kindred by the beloved Octavia Butler without being in a safe enough space to parse out the conversations that exist without and within that of Black women, Black American women, Black women of the diaspora, those who pretend to be Black women. There are conversations that must be had. And so because of that, we are going to take a walk together, maybe a run, a jog, a couple of other things, and really take a look at what are the geographies of Black women. So while Dr. Leslie King Hammond was here with you all last week and talked about the beauty that is bringing something like Kindred to screen, she also mentioned that Disney referred to this project as a story about slavery. While there's truth in that, a lot of truth in that, especially for those of you who have already started engaging the text, reading the text, being with the text, questioning the text, slavery is all up and through that thing. And yet, the truth of the matter, or a deeper truth, or maybe an extension of truth, or maybe one of many truths, is that the story is really about race, place, space, and time. So these are the places, the domains with which we're going to walk together today. For those of you, again, who are already in the text, God bless you. We love those folks who do their homework. Those of you who are coming to the text, we're waiting for you. We will hold space for you to do just that. Now, don't get to the end of the semester and not know what in the world we're talking about, because you will have had a whole spring break to get caught up in that thing. So what I'd love us to do is have some conversations about each and every one of these pieces. So when I think about race, space, place, and time, each one of those comes with their own packaging, their own beauty, their own disgust, if you will. But if I could give you a visual, I think this one here is probably one of the best ways for us to enter this conversation, in large part because it represents all four of those domains. We've got race. Most of you in this room are perceiving yourselves to be looking at Black women, young Black women at that. But you are perceiving this as Blackness. You are not misconstruing these as white girls, surely. Or are you? You're not misconstruing them as a young woman from Veracruz, Mexico. Or are you? Maybe these two girls exist in Russia. Or don't they? But the image that you're actually seeing is, it's in fact named Tamara and Tarika, Easter Sunday, 1995. Some of us in the room were alive in 1995. It was a good time, okay? For those of you who are replaying the 90s in terms of fashion and music, come talk to us. We'll tell you what it really was like. But what you'll see is this image was made by Bill Gaskins. He's a photographer. He actually happens to be the program director, the new program director of the new program, Photography, Media, and Society on our side of the bridge in graduate studies. But he was here as a graduate student, I think in 95 and 96 or something like that. And so he made this photo on Easter Sunday down at the harbor, as you can see in the background, right? So you've got race. You're perceiving yourselves to be looking at two Black girls. But you are also taking in space. You're taking in the space that they are even receiving you in, right? These ladies want you to know something as they stare at you deeply. They can probably tell you what lies you tell regularly because of how intensely they're connected to space and how they are perceived in space. There's also the conversation of place, right? So, and maybe I did that a little bit out of order. At the harbor has a large history here in the city of Baltimore, but most port cities have a large history of moving bodies, moving drugs, moving music, moving culture, moving lies. And so Baltimore is no different than any of the other port cities that you may have come from, born and raised in, desire to go spend your money in, or wherever the case may be. But then we also have a conversation not only about place, not only about space, but time. If in fact you've ever read Black women, and actually would bet every single thing I own that every single one of you are in the reading experience of Black women. How do I know this? Because I'm sure that most of you know that Beyonce is now, as of last night, the most Grammy Award winning artist in the world, regardless if you like her music or not. You know who Beyonce is. You might even know her middle name too, right? You know who her mother is. You know who her father is, who her sister is. So if you've ever been in the experience of reading Black women, one thing you will know, and you should know for sure, is that hair tells a story. And so these sisters right here are done, flexed, working out on these people. You hear what I'm saying? Please get into this hair. 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 Because not only are they inhabiting their space and place with this hair, but an artist had to have done that. Let's be clear about who did that. Whether it had been their sister, their cousin, their mother, their auntie, or someone who's been in their family for years and they've always gone to them on the Saturday before Easter Sunday to get their hair done. An artist did this, brought this from that ethos and made it something tangible. That's one definition of an artist, right? So again, these women are giving us an actual first layer of how we can understand Dana's experiences inside of Kindred, but the experiences, oh, did I touch that? What was I supposed to do with it? Keep it moving, keep it wiggling it. That's fine, don't worry, the next thing is gonna be important. So here's actually what I wanna do, because this is actually a beautiful moment. I want us, as we are thinking about as I was putting this presentation together, I should say, I was questioning, what exactly is race? What is it? And I mean that from a definition standpoint. I mean that from an operational standpoint. I mean it as what do you know it to mean? So what I'd like to invite you to do right now is take maybe about 30 seconds. It's about as much time as we're gonna need right now. So I want you to pull out your phone. For those of you who are still analog folks in a digital world, pull out your notepad and your pencil and your pen or whatever. And I'd like you to spend 30 seconds with yourself coming up with something like a short phrase, 3 bullets. For those of you who have been studying race across the world, may have a fully fleshed out definition, write it down. I'm not going to invite you to say it out loud. Don't get afraid. I mean, I want to, but I'm mindful of time. But I do want you to have something tangible to reference, not only throughout this presentation, and not only throughout your reading of Kindred, but also during your time here at Micah. So that whenever you put this particular notebook in your boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, non-gender friend house, when you're 26 like Dana, right, and then you come back to it when you're 32, I want you to know what it is you thought about race at this time, at this place, at this space. So put those things down. While you do that, I'm going to pull up we're gonna watch 2 quick videos by 2 intellectuals who have also been in the study of race, specifically in these Americas. And I'm gonna have them speak to it, highlight a little bit what one intellectual has to say, and then we'll go to the next one. So take your time, and I'm gonna get us set up. I'm gonna ask those up in the mic stand to make sure that I can get some audio playing with this, and I'm gonna move it forward. Yeah, that's fine. No, this is perfect for us. And as our students, our learners, our good people are getting their eyes together and their minds and thoughts together on what race is, we'll get ready to get started. And I want to make sure I put us at the right time. Okay. I think I'll see some thumbs up or something to let me know that I'm ready. Elizabeth, do you know if I make this big screen, it's going to get rid of the closed captioning, right? Okay, so we won't do that. Okay. I want everybody to be present. You saw someone working where, Elizabeth? Where should I be looking? Or maybe this one is, yeah. No, I don't see anyone up there. Thumbs up? Okay, let's try it. Hold on. Let's go here. Let's try this. James Baldwin, 1963. He's in conversation with Kenneth Clark. You may have heard Kenneth Clark's name, you may not have. Kenneth Clark is super important to the conversation around the desegregation of education in the United States of America. In that, when you think about Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, one of the crucial elements to that case passing is the Dahl test. And the Dahl test, you may be looking, write it in your notes, you can YouTube and see it recreated. You can actually see, I think, some archival footage of Kenneth Clark and his wife, Mamie Clark. They were child psychologists. And what they did is they took dolls, a white doll and a black doll, and they went throughout the rural South, and they asked young black children certain questions about the dolls. Questions like, which one is the prettier doll? Which one is the smarter doll? Which one is the nice doll? Which one is the fun doll? And case after case after case after case after case, the black children would consistently choose the white doll in answer to those questions, even though they themselves were black. And with questions like, who's the mean doll? Who's the angry doll? Who's the poor doll? They would consistently choose the black doll. And what both Kenneth and Mamie were clear about is this speaks to the internalization of the process of racism and the ways in which internalizing an inferiority complex that was given to you will then stay with you even if no one is in the room to tell you this question, right? So this is who they're in, he's in conversation with, and he had just been asked a question about optimism and or pessimism when it comes to race relations here in the United States. Again, 1963. Let's try it.
It's precisely as bright or as dark as the future of the country. It is entirely up to the American people and our representatives. It is entirely up to the American people whether or not they're going to face and deal with and embrace this stranger whom they maligned so long. What white people have to do is try to find out in their own hearts why it was necessary to have a nigger in the first place. Because I'm not a nigger.
Trigger
I'm a
warning,
man.
language.
But if you think I'm a nigger, it means you need it. The question you've got to ask yourself, the white population of this country has got to ask itself, North and South, because it's one country, and for a Negro, there's no difference in the North and the South. There's just a difference in the way they castrate you. But the fact of the castration is the American fact. If I'm not the nigger here, and you invented him, you the white people invented him, then you got to find out why.
Well,
And the future of the country depends on that, whether or not it's able to ask that question.
as a Negro and as an American,
I'll pause
I can only
there.
hope that
You can take a look at it longer. I forgot to set the tone and my welcome that there will be language. You will hear more language and you will see more things as we move through. So take care of yourself as best you need to in the space. And I'm going to actually use this same word in which causes so much strife in this country that you've already read in the first few pages, first chapter, I think, maybe second chapter of Kindred. So stay with me here. What James Baldwin says is, the future of this country is dependent on that positionality of the black people here. And that it's important to ask the question, who invented the nigger in the first place? Question one, whose invention is it? But interestingly enough, I think that the most powerful segment of what he just said is the extension of that question. It's not the who invented it alone. Why was a nigger invented in the first place? Who can give you that answer other than the inventor? And until the inventor is willing to ask themselves that question, America will stay in turmoil. Now, this is unique, of course, because most people who come to this country not born of here will say, y'all tripping. Y'all steady be trying to put this black and white situation on us. I'm none of those things. True. And yet when we talk about whiteness and blackness, we're also talking about a sensibility, not purely a cultural manifestation or expression. We're talking about a sensibility. So that even as we have folks who come to this country, likewise, if I go to another country, there's a sensibility with which I enter that space and place with. So it really doesn't matter from where you've come. The question is still valid and should be posed to all of us. And we should expect our spirits to give us answers, true ones, to such a question. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit this one. I think so. It's come up on my computer, so maybe it needs a second here. The touchpad, there we go. I'd like to take us to another intellectual. And this is, of course, who you may know, Toni Morrison, Pulitzer Prize winning author. She's written 11 novels. Excuse me, my P's are popping. She's written 11 novels, fiction, in her career, and countless other nonfiction essays and the such. She came out, if we look at time, right? Dana, we meet Dana on her birthday in 1976, just short of America's own 200th birthday. Just a little over a year shy of such. And so Toni Morrison has been writing since 1970, at least from a published standpoint, right? And so similarly, she was asked a question. I'm going to take a second. Her interview is a little bit longer. She also has been in an interview where she was asked a question similarly about race. And these are her responses to what race looks like, means, and how we should understand it in her fiction and nonfiction work. And you must forgive me, I cannot remember the interview, who's interviewing her, I cannot remember her name at this moment, but let's see what Toni has to say about race and how it connects with what James Baldwin had to say about who invented the nigger and why was it invented in the first place.
Die inside. I want to be surprised and shocked every time.
You have in your writing certainly marginalized whites. Why are they of no particular interest to you, or seemingly no particular interest?
Well, I was interested in another kind of literature that was not just confrontational, black versus white. I was really interested in black readership. And I wanted to do, I think, for me, the allegory or the parallel is black music, which is as splendid and complicated and wonderful as it is because its audience was within its primary audience. The fact that it has become universal, worldwide, anyone, everyone can play it, and it has evolved, is because it wasn't tampered with and editorialized within the community. So I wanted the literature that I wrote to be that way. I could just go straight to where the soil was, where the fertility was in this landscape. And also, I wanted to feel free not to have the white gaze in this place that was so precious to me, which was the work.
And you will maintain this safe place for yourself, for your art? You don't think you will ever change and write books that incorporate white lives into them substantially?
I have done.
In a substantial way?
You can't understand how powerfully racist that question is, can you? Because you could never ask a white author, when are you going to write about black people? Whether he did or not, or she did or not. Even the inquiry comes from a position of being in the center.
And being used to being in the center.
And being used to being in the center. And saying, you know, is it ever possible that you will enter the mainstream? It's inconceivable that where I already am is the mainstream.
On
It's inconceivable that where I already am is my mainstream. Now, to be fair, you may not have read Toni Morrison's work, so you might be taking this in like, well, why was that in fact a racist question? But if in fact you took some time to read even one of Toni Morrison's texts, very first one being The Bluest Eye, 1970, and going on, Song of Solomon, Tar Baby, Beloved, you can go on and on and on. She does, in fact, involve white people in her work. But to her point, they are not the central story in her work, because what did she say? She did not want the white gaze in that place that was precious to her. And so when the interviewer says, well, will you ever write about them? And she says, I have. Her response is, in a substantial way. Won't you write about us in the same beautiful way that you write about those black people that you write of? Won't you do us the same justice and write about us as beautifully as you write about your own people? And yet the question will never be asked to a white author. When will you ever write so beautifully about those black people? It's a question, right? So I want you to realize that James Baldwin in 63 and Toni, I think this was maybe like 2003 or something, Hair is really what I'm looking at to try to date that one, is also saying, let's think about the ways in which we come to this conversation about race, which is why I invited you to write your own definitions of race down, because where do they line up in these conversations? The who invented and the why. And what does it mean to be central in the work? We'll come back to race in a moment. It became clear to me also that if we're going to talk about black geographies, specifically black women's geographies, we must in fact talk about an operational definition of how we can understand what is a black geography in the first place. And so Catherine McKittrick, these are a lot of words up here, and there'll be a couple of slides with a lot of words, so I'll walk you through them. Catherine McKittrick is one of the foremost intellectuals when it comes to black geographies, and that means literally like where they exist, where maps are where in which black people exist, how are they created, where are the lines drawn, where did lines used to exist before they exist in the way that we understand them now. And so in 2007, she comes up with this text, or she edits this text with Clyde Adrian Woods. And they present this as a definition, and we're going to use it for the rest of this presentation as well. So do whatever you need to take it back with you, to keep it in your space and place. But the history of black people, race, in the Americas and the Caribbean, place, cannot be told without addressing powerful geographical shifts. And they name three of them: massive forced migration, land dispossession, and both legal and de facto segregation. That's what's inside of those ellipses that I wasn't able to put on the slide. So as you begin to think about how Dana is moving through this text, I want you to consider her story without these three pink pieces. Without us understanding a massive migrational shift, being put off of one's land, or land that one has worked. And let's complicate the conversation a little bit, shall we? So when black people in the United States, what we now understand to be the United States of America, make the argument that they want reparations, they deserve reparations for the land that they worked in the country that they built, there's some truth in that. And this land did not belong to the black people who built it up even before they got here. So the land from which we have taken it and built on was already someone else's. And then let's complicate it yet one more step. Black folks did not come to this country for the first time as slaves. wasn't the first time that they existed here. And I encourage you to ask anybody who's ever lived close to the water and ask them about their imagination. Don't they ever wonder what would happen if you just took down a tree and hauled it out and put that tree right on the water and just sailed for as far as you can go? It would be very common. So the amount of black people who have lived on the water have in fact paid attention to the ways in which water flows and have gotten on those flows and have found themselves in other places and spaces well before they were brought here. Now, what's really true is that I have to talk about myself in this work and not give this to you as some sort of lofty, well-read woman who's slightly cute, okay? That's important, but it's not what's truest about me. It is, in fact, my own geographies as a black woman. And I encourage you to consider your own geographies in whatever identities you identify yourself as. And then try to do it without any of your identities. What then do you have of yourself? So I acknowledge that I lead as being a woman, as a black Southern woman, in that order. In that order. And yet, if I took all of those identities away, who would I still be? Who could give me an answer or some validation on that? So when I think of that place and those places from which I've come, I've been very challenged because the place that I come from is very much so shaped like that of a pregnant woman, who you see in front of you now, Serena Williams. And as someone who has studied sexuality for the better part of 20 years, I'm very, very clear about language. And I'm clear what we say about who can and cannot have children, who can and cannot become pregnant. I understand. But as a way to honor those places from whence I come, the ancestors who gave birth to me, when I speak about birth, I'm speaking about women. That is an intentional choice that is not meant to hurt or harm or cut anyone out. Rather, all of the ancestors who are lined up in this space right now behind me would understand that. And I want them to always stay in communication of understanding me so they can continuously protect me. It's never a slight to anyone else. So if you take Serena's beautiful pregnant body, you will see a parallel to that with the great state of Georgia. You will see where I was seated, where I was conceived, a place called Lumber City, Georgia. And you will see just 33 miles northwest where it is I was born, in a little town called Eastman, Georgia. But what you will notice is I was, in fact, seated and born inside of the belly of the great state of Georgia. And for all that Georgia is and all that Georgia is not, I recognize that I would not be who I am if it were not for Georgia. Now, the complication is that we left Georgia when I was really little. My mama said, to hell with this. And so my brother and I, who are lovers of music, were like, Mama, why you ain't go to Atlanta? That's where everybody was. She's like, that's because that's where everybody was. So even my own mother's understanding of her own desire for space and place said, I don't want to be where everyone else is. So she moved us to a place where she knew no one. There was no family, there was no one, there was nothing. Is there a Duval County in the place? Is there North Florida in the place? I see some folks getting hype in the back. We appreciate that. So we moved about 3 hours south, first to a place called Amelia Island Plantation. Let's name the place. You can't be mistaken about what a plantation is in this country. Amelia Island Plantation is most known for tennis. So many people come there to qualify before they go on to the other large tennis spaces. And yet, growing up in Florida, here's what was so powerful to me, is in all of my personal mythology, I always speak about being born, being from Georgia, almost exclusively negating my Florida heritage. And I had to ask myself, why do I employ only one of my homes in my personal mythology? And I realize it's because Georgia affirms my blackness. Florida does not. Why? Because Florida is beaches and Disney. No one is coming to the state of Florida wanting to talk about Fort Mose right outside of St. Augustine, where escaped slaves built their own land. Nobody wants to talk about the same time that the Tulsa race riots were happening in 1921, they were also burning up Ocala, which is also, let's come on back up in here, Ocala, up right about the end of that northeast, kind of over there in that northwest space. Nobody wants to come to Florida and talk about Tallahassee, Florida A&M University students, okay, HBCU, FAMU, go Rattlers, leading sit-ins in Tallahassee, in the Capitol. Well before we have an understanding about what was happening before the civil rights of the 60s. We're talking in the late 1950s. No one wants to talk about the ways in which South Miami, Miami-Dade County, Trick Daddy loves the kids. We're not talking about the ways in which Miamians have been oppressed. We're not even talking about the ways in which when you come from IT, or that which we now call Haiti, to Miami, you are in fact the bottom of the barrel. So that all of the jokes are made about you. Oh, you working like a Haitian. Or you got on too many colors like a Haitian. The Haitians have now become the bottom. And we could go all up and down the state of Florida. And I'm saying, how is it that I left the state without knowing these things? Because there is, in fact, a larger narrative at play for all of us when it comes to space, place, time, and how race shows up in all of those places. Florida is not for black people. And if you go and call yourself somebody Spanish, you better be the right kind, which means you need to be the white Cuban. And if, in fact, you want to come up in here with some darker skin and some kinky hair, and you want to start bachata in and moving all of these body parts around, chill. So again, how is it that there are certain places and spaces we can exist in and not even fully know the histories of those places? So I encourage you to ask yourself this very question, right? About your own mythology and how home, and even acknowledging that I have two homes is new for me, right? Because people who have two homes must be rich and wealthy. And if I'm a black woman, surely I can't be. Except that's a lie. I am. So as we move into kind of a larger context that will help us understand a little bit more about what's happening with Dana. Because a lot is happening with Dana. Can we say that? Come on, amen, somebody. There's a lot happening with Dana. There's a lot happening with Kevin. Rufus. We're going to get to Rufus in a minute. Let me take my time. One of the things that we begin to consider, if we continue, so if that is the way we talk about race and place to some degree, right, and space to some degree, we also then have to talk about how bodies move to certain places. How did you get here? Did you fly? Did you drive? Did someone drive you? Did you take a bus? Did you take the train? How did you get here, right? Were you born here? Have your people always lived here? And so does anyone know the primary narrative about why the Great Migration happened? The Great Migration being that time between roughly about 1916 to about 1970, where roughly 6 to 7 million black bodies moved from the south to the north. Anybody want to guess? I'll take guesses. What's the primary reason that happened? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell y'all this was going to be interactive. This is that moment. This is interactive. Anyone? Yes, please. Will you share with us your name? Abigail. Abigail, give us a thought. Take your time. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's go with that, Abigail. We're going to go all the way with that. So we're going to talk about state-sanctioned violence, mostly enacted by the Ku Klux Klan, born and raised in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and then gave birth to other places, South Carolina, North Carolina, and the like. But then there's also political reasons, right? Like, how do we manage that? That is, in fact, kind of the primary narrative. So much so that art has been made of it. You all may be very familiar with Jacob Lawrence. You may not. This may be your very first time. All are welcome here. So Jacob Lawrence, painter, he worked in other medium as well, but in this moment, painting, created what we now know as the Great Migration series. And this is the first panel, and I can't remember how many there are. If there's anyone in here who knows how many there are, please, 60. Dr. Leslie King Hammond said there are 60. This is the first panel, and this is the title. During World War I, there was a great migration north by Southern African Americans. And what you'll notice is amazing cities, New York, Chicago, and what's the other one up there? St. Louis. Of course, we get the great Maya Angelou from St. Louis, right? So Lawrence gives us a way of thinking about where all of these black bodies, race, are in this train station, space, on their way to somewhere else, place, over course of time, okay? Time. That is, in fact, the primary narrative. And there have never been more black bodies or any group of people who've moved in these here United States of America since then, even our first person and indigenous peoples in the Trails of Tears. And the narrative, as Abigail said, was to flee state-sanctioned violence, Jim Crow laws, oppression, depression, recession, on and on and on. But I encourage you to ask yourself this question, and I think this is also on the guide that you all will have, right? But what does it mean to lose part of yourself, all for the purpose of trying to preserve yourself? Because here's something that I know about humanity. Even those of us who love to get on a plane, whether we got money or not, and go off somewhere and drink something on a beach out of a coconut, I still want to come back to my home when I'm done. With the people that I done traveled with, they done got on my last damn nerve. Who gonna come get these people? They don't want to split the tab evenly. What is this? I'm not traveling with y'all anymore. Or I don't speak the language, or the food has made me sick, or I've gotten enough of luxury and I want to go somewhere. I want to go back to my home. It's important to realize that people don't leave their home unless there is a real reason. No one's just saying, you know what, it would be so great to pack up all of my belongings and walk from Guatemala to the line of Texas and Mexico. That sounds like an adventure. Not as many as you think, okay? Not as many as you think. Even you, if somebody said, pack up all of your things right now, and we're taking you to Tanzania. As beautiful as Tanzania is, are you ready to do that? Are you in a position to be able to do that? So what does it mean to have people who have had to make hard decisions to leave family, to leave place, to leave space, in hopes of creating something other than where they are, better than where it is that they are, with hope that it has to be better? Oh, that's deep. And so it is no surprise to me that Lawrence also gives us on his sixth pane, take in the image. These are black bodies on a train to any one of those cities, and there were others. There was Cincinnati, there was Baltimore, there was Chicago. I think we mentioned Chicago. There were many, many cities. California, yes, we went west too. So there's a beautiful line. You've got Florida and Georgia, they go straight up the coast. When you start talking about Alabama and Mississippi, they're kind of going up too. They take you all the way up to Chicago, up the Midwest. But when you start talking about the Louisiana and that Texas, we're not doing that. We're going west. We're going to go to California. So that even when I was in high school, 10th grade, she was a mixed girl. But her identification of race, she would have called herself a black girl. She comes in, she looked like Mariah Carey, and we were all like, whoa, how did you do that? And she, you know, the new girls in town, so we're all asking her where she's from. She's like, Nebraska. We all said in unison, there are black people in Nebraska? Which shows even the shallowness with which we understood how black bodies have moved through space, place, and time. There are black people everywhere. There's no place black people have never been in this world. It's some Chinamen blacker than my papa. It's some Indians chocolater than my papa. How they got that way? Was it just the sun? Surely not. Come on now. So when we take a look at Lawrence's sixth pane, you might not be able to see it as much, all black bodies, but what you see, what is jutting out, what is inviting your conversation, is this black woman breastfeeding her child with her suitcase open in the middle of the aisle on the train. Because the other reason that black bodies left the South actually what I would consider a larger conversation to be had is truly the fact that black women were running from rape by white men, as was Dana, as was Alice. And so when black mamas decided that they could not allow their now budding prepubescent daughter to be left in a town, left in a place, left in a space where if she walked from anywhere, her house to anywhere, she in fact might find herself violated. There's a letter in archives that talk about women writing to their husbands saying, I'm catching the midnight train and I'm going to my auntie's house in Chicago because the white boys have started circling. And what you find out is she had a 12-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And so when we talk about black women's geographies, we have to be clear that people have made some really tough decisions because of ways in which people have moved. Now, I'd rather you take a picture of this because I'm almost out of time. And how did that happen? Abby Lincoln in 1966 in the Negro Digest asked these very questions. Who's going to save black women? Who's going to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe? Who's going to preserve black innocence, black female innocence? This isn't about do it for us in the way you do it for white girls. This is simply saying, I have a young female child who should be allowed to remain innocent. Who's going to help make that happen? Of course, they go to the land of milk and honey. They leave these places of the South. But what they find out is when they get to the Chicagos, it's ugly there. What did James Baldwin say? The North and the South are no different. And white folks did not want them black bodies up there. Maybe for right reasons. You're going to take our jobs. You're going to move into our houses. So what do? They put the black people in these tenement yards and leave them there in squalor. But then there's also the thing that really kind of moves me, and I'm going to hush here. More big words, but what it tells you is Virginia, 1664, or was it 62? 62, creates the first policy that makes any child born to a black mother a slave for the rest of her life, a slave for the rest of his life. Slavery has always existed since the beginning of time. What these here Americas did that was different is it made you follow the disposition of your mother. Your mother was free, like Alice's mama, you were free. Your mama was a slave, you will stay a slave. And Virginia did that first because they said, as you'll see, there's some questioning about how these white British boys are coming over here making these babies with these black women, black of the berry, the sweet of the juice. What are we going to do with that? Because, of course, the British would pass on their wealth through the children, right, through the male, through the father. Well, now if daddy over there across the water making multiple families, what are we going to do about it? I often say that I think white men should be pulled up on more child support charges than anything. But don't nobody want to have that conversation with me. Listen, then right on after that, 2 years later, Maryland does the same thing. But Maryland says, if you are in this province right now and we catch you or at any time, you will be a slave for the rest of your life. Durante vita. For the rest of your life, you'll be a slave. Right? So ultimately, this is major important because the black women that you love, the black women have given you hair, have given you fashion, have given you culture, have given you music, have given you body. They've all been underneath this exact same premise around race, space, place, and time. Lauryn Hill, my God, has 6 beautiful children. Oh, but the way the people went on her. Oh, from her first baby. That's where we get the beautiful song Zion from her debut album, 1997, 1998, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. The people are telling me don't have my baby because I've got a career, but I want you. The idea that black women want their children, blasphemous. Oh, I want to go on, but there's got to be questions and things. Again, you now have black women, study just came out in early January. You can be the wealthiest black woman and you will still face obstetric outcomes for you and your child on par with poor white women. Serena Williams almost died having her baby. Beyonce almost died having them twins. These women use their bodies as a vessel, as a canvas, as a painting. And the nurses and doctors say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Almost died. Right? Wealthiest black moms more likely to die in childbirth than poorest white mamas from Appalachia, from Dundalk, from Hampton. What y'all want to do? We can go. We can go. Right? The stories are not old. The stories are not old. Well, that's not true. The stories are old. They're not new. The stories are not new. We've been talking about the salaciousness and the scandalous of black bodies for the longest time. But who invented the black whore? And for what reason? Daniel Holtzclaw, police officer in Kansas, spies on, or just goes after 13, well, that's what he got charged for, 13 black women who had been known to be prostitutes and or have drug habits. He used public resources, looked them all up, looked at where they're usually found, drove his cop car around to all 13 of them at different times, and solicited them for sexual favors, and then said, if you don't, I will take you to jail. So what happens? He gets arrested. He gets 238 years. He crying. He wasn't crying when he was riding around that police car, I can tell you that much. Why? Because he did not believe that anybody cared about these black women. These black women. The black women in Westport, okay? These black women over west, these black women. Pennsylvania Avenue, these black women. Now you're a black woman in Towson, maybe we won't. But we know that that's not true either. Let me hush up. And I'm gonna close here. As Dana's stays, this is from Wikipedia, I don't lie about where I got this stuff from. This isn't my original thought. But as Dana's stays get longer, she becomes more entangled and has to make hard decisions about how to return to her own time. Thank you. I know we're out of time. Come on in.
We're at time, but I wanted to give you all the chance to ask Dr. Harvey some questions.
I do have a microphone for anybody asking questions, so the question can be heard by the entire room.
And for those of you who are students and going to class, I respect that. I know, it was a lot. I'll let them all take it in. You're welcome. Good. Okay. One question and we'll close out. Yes, please, please, please.
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I want to punctuate your first slide about FX Disney and their commitment to this project. The day after my talk, they canceled. They canceled.
Oh, they canceled Kindred. Wow.
They will not be completing the series.
Wow.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You need to know how powerful this lecture was and what we are doing here for you today and through your career so that when you go out in the world, you understand the dynamics of what is going on. Oh, please, some white males probably read the rest of the script and said, oh, this is about who created
Stay put,
the
one
nigger.
more sec.
Do you understand? Oh, it's money. They're not making more money. They're not making enough money because we were brought here for financial, economic reasons.
So real quick, before you go, good people, before you, especially in my class, so understand that as we move forward with this work, take these last two lectures into context, that when you're reading and going over the work, don't see Dana and Alice and Octavia Butler as people you cannot identify with simply because you're not black and you're not a woman, because they're human beings. And the story is about agency and what it means to be a human being, and try to connect with the work in that way. Right.
Y'all have a great week.